Okay, another great episode featuring Ryan Krupp, who's a dear friend of mine. We have so many similarities, both in private practice, but he's so passionate about a lot of things outside of orthopedics. In particular, he's an amazing teacher, a multidisciplinary teacher, PAs, as well as nurse practitioners, as well as athletic trainers, family practice, geriatric doctors, really making sure that everyone really has a good community understanding of orthopedics and the things that he does. He's passionate about research, cranking out great papers every year. He's really involved in industry. He's one of the key designers for the ROSA robotic device, which is put out by Zimmer Biomet. It's the first of its kind robot for total shoulder replacement. So we talk about that. Really fascinating stuff. Also a big fan of laser and also opioid sparing surgery. It's a great episode. We have a lot of things in common. He's very passionate. I know you're going to love it. Dr. Scott Sigman, hashtag follow the fro.
From Medical Media, this is The Ortho Show.
Hello, world. Dr. Scott Sigman, your favorite opioid-sparing orthopedic surgeon here for another episode of the Ortho Show podcast, where everyone knows we bring you the best of the best. I'm very excited to bring on a very close friend and colleague of mine, Dr. Ryan Krupp, who's an orthopedic surgeon at a multi-specialty group, Norton Healthcare in Louisville, Kentucky. He specializes in sports medicine as well as shoulder reconstruction. Ryan, what a pleasure it is to have you on the show, brother.
Thanks for having me. It's my pleasure to be here.
You're one of my go-to people, man. When Ryan Krupp talks, I'm listening for sure. So it's really a pleasure to have you here. So listen, man, we always start at the beginning on these shows. We like to know where, when, and why. Where were you brought up and why are you an orthopedic surgeon? Were there doctors in the family? What's the history?
So I grew up in Northern Ohio in a small town and, played sports my whole life. And the medicine was actually a far opposite. My dad worked in a factory for 30 some years in very blue collar area of Ohio. And so I had an open tibia fracture when I was 16 playing basketball, got undercut on a breakaway layup. And that was really kind of my first experience with the medical field. Unbelievable work that the orthopedists did at the time, and they actually had to take me from one hospital to up to the Medical College of Ohio, and I had a tibia nail and all that. So still have it in my office actually, so I get to show residents and med students and things. But that's kind of was my first foray into medicine, and saw the amazing things that they could do, and really kind of sparked my interest, and then that progressed forward from there.
It's a common story, right, for us boneheads. Something happens to us. We're athletes. You break this, you pull that, whatever. You meet some orthopedic surgeon, you're like, that's the coolest guy I know. And then it's like, yo, that's what I want to do. I think that's pretty cool that you have the tibial nail, though. I have to say that is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Assuming that, which is hardware removal, which is one of our podcasts that we just did yesterday, or that we just released, talking about how we're trying to get rid of hardware. But that's a great story. But obviously you were a great student. You went to University of Dayton for college, chemical engineer, summa cum laude, smart guy. And so was it just then? I mean, you were like, okay, I recognize this whole thing. You were playing football, I think as well in college. And so tell us about the track to orthopedics. Was that early on?
Yeah, so I always had an interest, and I spent some time shadowing things when I was coming through, high school and college, and I was kind of chemical engineering and pre-med. I knew medicine was really kind of the thing I really wanted to do, but like I said, I don't come from money, and decided to work, and so I actually worked as a chemical engineer for a year first when I got out of undergrad, and then I sold pharmaceuticals for Merck for a year, and during the year I worked for Merck, I then applied to med school, and then here we are decades later. But I tell you, I wouldn't trade those couple of years of experience both in business and engineering. I do get involved in product development, different things of that nature, and just all these different experiences I think kind of make you who you are, and allow you to kind of take on the tasks that our profession throws at us on a daily basis. So not exactly the the normal straightforward progression to where we're at, but I wouldn't trade it, honestly.
No, I mean, that's great. I think those gap years that they call it now, right? You weren't really taking a gap year. You were a chemical engineer, for crying out loud, which is interesting because, chemical engineers, my father was a chemical engineer from MIT. You make a lot of money initially graduating, right? You're like one of the highest paid college graduates, but there's just not a lot of upside. You sort of, plateau pretty quickly.
Yeah, and it's an interesting, if you don't love what you do and have a real kind of spark for it, something I tell my kids every day is find something you have a passion for, because otherwise it's just work, right? And so try to find something you can make money at, but that you enjoy. And so for me, that I really wasn't going to stop or be happy until I made the leap to medicine. Although when I went home and confirmed my wife that I was quitting my really good job to go back to school.
Yeah.
She didn't necessarily have the same vigor for the move that I had initially, but it all
Right.
worked out pretty well.
Sounds like there were going to be some loans that were going to be involved in heading back to medical school for 4 years. That's for sure.
That's right.
It's interesting. There was another billionaire just yesterday that has decided to give $1 billion to Johns Hopkins now. So there'll be another school where kids are going to be able to go to school without having to pay tuition. That was Bloomberg. So that was pretty interesting. But so you finally figured it out. You're going to go to University of Louisville for medical school. And were you destined for orthopedics from like day one, or were you still trying to figure it out?
Yeah, I mean, that was always kind of my interest, and not only I think a lot of us that are kind of fixers, right? So we're kind of like carpenters for people. So that always attracted me, because I think a lot of the problems are, a good majority of the problems that we have in orthopedics are things that we can evaluate. We can say, oh, here's the problem. Let's develop a solution and then go after it. And so that really was attractive to me. I gave a good look to other specialties I was going through, trying to have an open mind, but I always kind of kept navigating back to orthopedics.
Yeah, we're egotists a little bit. We want to help people. It's got to be demonstrable. That's what's great about orthopedics, right? Somebody comes in with a rotator cuff tear, they can't lift their arm, they can't work. We fix it, they go back to work. If you're an internist and you put somebody on hypertensive medications, and for 20 years they didn't get a stroke, they're not coming back in and thanking you. So there's a little bit of encouragement for us in that regard. But so it sounds like medical school was great. Again, you excelled, and you decided it was going to be University of Louisville for your orthopedic residency. You were stuck in Louisville, dude. I mean, you did leave for one more year, but you were there for a while at that point.
Yeah, it's crazy. You just never know kind of where things are going to take you. When I moved to Louisville as an engineer, I was on a kind of a management track. So I was supposed to be here for 2 years. And then just part of the program, you go on to the next stop. And so, here my 2 years are up, and I end up staying for med school. And, it's a big, small town. It's really, for raising a family and things like that, it's nice because there's a lot to do, but yet it's, it doesn't have a lot of the other big city headaches. And so you end up spending med school residency here. And, I really wanted a place where I got to use my hands and really, from day one, be engaged as part of the process of taking care of patients and things of that nature. And it, so it worked out well for me. And I was fortunate enough to then get, a great fellowship. Was really my number one choice with Rich Hawkins down in Carolina. And yeah, man, I tell you, I wouldn't trade that year for anything. One of the greatest years I could have ever spent with one of the best guys that you're ever going to meet.
Yeah, no, everybody that says that about Hawk, I mean, he's just, one of the legends of sports medicine, sort of built, sports medicine as to what it is today. And we've had a number of his fellows on, and everyone really has the same thought. What's interesting about your residency, the residencies are different, right? There are some residencies where you might sit around and you're watching a lot of famous people and you're hoping to get a couple reps, but there's other residencies where you really, learn how to operate. And I think that was Louisville for you for sure. And then, which gave you the opportunity to go down to the Stedman Hawkins Clinic of the Carolinas. Now, was JT Tokish there at the time as well, or?
No, JT was still doing his service to our country and to his patients. And so that was kind of pre JT coming back. But Steve Singleton and Doug Weiland and the crew. I mean, just a bunch of other like-minded folks that Hawk surrounded, and really, I mean, if you think about all the guys that he's trained over the years, they're very similar. They're guys like you. See, there's good guys that do a good job and work hard, play hard, and it's just kind of a fellowship, a bit of fraternity, if you will. And that's the great thing about it too, is that, lifelong you have those relationships and the mentoring when you're a junior guy coming out. And so it's really been cool over the years to make relationships with the different guys throughout the decades that Hawk has trained.
Yeah, and you guys are all innovators too. I think that was a message that he set out to you guys quite clearly, that it's not just to be an orthopedic surgeon and care for your patient, but also what else are you going to do? You guys all seem to be partnered with industry. You're coming up with great ideas. We'll talk a little bit about it. You're essentially you're not in an academic practice. It's more or less it's a private type, practice, although it's a large multi-specialty group. But yet, you still have a tremendous passion for research. And I think that comes from your time with Hawk as far as all those other things that you were doing.
Absolutely, absolutely. And he always encouraged us, to kind of push the envelope and not just take the status quo and try to, help develop the next level of treatments and thoughts and to be kind of leaders in the field. And then a big part of that also was to then teach and pass those things along to others. And so you'll see, I think that a lot of in that kind of lineage as well of really being engaged in like both research and teaching, both at, whether it be in residents, medical students, that kind of thing, and even with industry and helping to teach others when there's new innovations that come out.
Yeah, we're going to talk about each one of those for you in particular because you have great passion in that. But it seemed to me like your kids must have been born at some point or another, because you were destined to head back to Louisville, right? I mean, you had set up shop there, you had family, your wife. Did your wife even join you in the Carolinas, or did she stay in Louisville?
No, she did. We actually, our son was born right during my 5th year, kind of during the trauma rotation, in my 5th year of residency. And like we said, mentioned about Louisville, I mean, it's a grinder program. So, heavy trauma, level 1 center. And so that was an interesting time, for me for sure. And for my wife as well. So we went away for about my year and then came back and it is interesting how things happen. I looked at jobs all over the country. We didn't really have family here, so we weren't, I guess, tied to Louisville if from that perspective. But there are, whether it's a contract or timing, and as well as I do, that's a big part of it, is having the opportunity and being at the right time to get something done. And so it was a unique opportunity to come and help try to build something special.
Yeah, no, and we'll talk about that. I think it's if I take a look at your CV, one of the things that jumps out is your active education across multidisciplines, right? And that's orthopedics, for residents and fellows, but physician assistants, athletic trainers, family medicine, geriatrics programs as well. And, I had the privilege, thank you for that invitation, of coming to the Norton, sports conference, where it was a multidisciplinary conference. It was a great conference, so well attended. And obviously that's a passion for you to provide education, not just in orthopedics, but across multiple disciplines. Where does that come from?
I mean, I think a big part of that is just, the experiences and the people that I've had throughout the years of my own training, whether it was in school, even when there was, different folks, when they even know that you're going to orthopedics, right? So sometimes people kind of like, well, great, he's going to orthopedics, I'm not even going to waste my time. But I had so many great professors over the years that still took an interest, and I took a lot of things away that, even though it may not be in my primary specialty, that I learned and were able to utilize in the care of my patients even today. And I think that same kind of thing, that pay it forward attitude, really was impressed upon me along that path.
Yeah, well, you're truly a leader within Norton Healthcare about that multidisciplinary process. So, kudos to you that's something that, because it really is a private practice. You're not truly academic per se, although you're, clinical instructor. So you have to choose that. It's not something that just happens, right? And so obviously that was important to you. And again, within private practice, you're a prolific researcher. Every year you're publishing a few very important papers. And so that, again, is not by accident. You have to choose that path. in a private practice. You don't have fellows, you don't have residents, you don't have medical students that are, helping out. Hopefully you have a research assistant that's helping to do that. But where does that passion come from? Was that also from Hawk and your time in residency as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think he always kind of impressed that upon us. We did a lot of good research with him along the way. And then even when I got into residency, I was fortunate to link up with a couple of my attendings that were big into research and from a clinical perspective, and was able to kind of balance that with the regular needs of practice. And then coming into the setting here, it was important for me, and I got the support of our system. And I do have a couple of research coordinators, which they're a huge value. There is no way you can do multi-center trials and other things if you don't have that infrastructure in place. And then fortunately now I have a good friend of mine, Dr. John Nyland, who is just unbelievable in the whole rehab and wellness type of space, and is a prolific research from a perspective. If you get something put together, he will make sure that thing gets pushed across the finish line and gets published. Because how many times we've been involved in studies or projects and then they just kind of flounder, right?
Absolutely.
John, I hand that off to him. I know he's going to wear somebody down, and that thing's going to get published somewhere.
Yeah, that's my Sean McMillan. That's if I got projects and things, if I get Sean involved on it, he's a pit bull. We're gonna get that thing published one way or another.
Absolutely, you have to have that.
Yeah.
Otherwise it just doesn't go anywhere. So.
Yeah, no, I love it. So listen, you and I are kindred spirits on another area in particular, and that is, even though we're in private practice, is really believing in partnership with industry, right, as to how we can innovate together and really make changes in the things that we do. And so one of our favorite Ortho Show alumni is Ivan Tornos, CEO of Zimmer Biomet, and I love his quote, which we'll pull up again, which is, I asked, I said, is industry relationships important to you? And he was, with surgeons in particular, he's like, Scott, that is mission critical. So, let's talk a little bit about, some of your industry partnerships, and one that I think you're very excited about, which is the ROSA robotic shoulder project that you are one of the lead designers on, if I'm not mistaken. And so, we'd love to hear from you. First of all, like, how did you get involved? And then what was the process? How arduous was that? And now, how excited are you to have FDA approval for this and being able to really launch something that you've helped to create?
Yeah, so partly you have some of those relationships and you work on some projects, and you show an interest in various aspects of those types of teams, and ability to work together and have some energy to move things forward. So there's a lot of stuff going on. Fortunately, there's a great team of engineers that we get to work with, which is a lot of fun. Typical surgeons were like, we want everything yesterday and we want everything all at once. So we're trying to navigate that, but they take the challenges and the tasks and then come back and say, okay, here, we've reiterated this, let's look at it. And then you go back in the lab and you play around with it and you say, okay, well, this is working, this isn't, what do we need to change? And it's just going through multiple iterations, and so version 1.0 that we're working on right now won't be the same as 1.6 and so on. And so that's kind of the fun part about it as well, is it's a constantly evolving, and really your imagination is really what's going to drive us as we go forward.
So who are the surgeon team leaders with you on the project as well?
Oh, there's a number of guys, John Sperling up in the Mayo Clinic, Tom DeQuinn, Tom, I tell you, Tom is amazing with planning software. Talk about to the detail. And so that's what's fun about these projects too, because you always learn something, right? So you come in things you think and then somebody else suggests something, you're like, oh, I never thought about that. And so that's part of it too. It always challenges to learn, or someone poses a question and it makes you look at things from a different perspective. Dave Snyder out in Colorado, one of my dear friends. I think if I think you talked to Dave as well.
Yeah,
you're just a unbelievable wealth of knowledge and a historian throughout surgery. And that's just the beginning part of the team. The team is pretty vast, but
all right. So for my mother, Judy, who's listening, we always like to try and explain, like, so what's the robot doing? Why is it going to help my mother when she's undergoing a shoulder replacement?
Yeah, so the key with the robot is basically that you can develop a plan. So imagine doing a CT scan, which is a two-dimensional slices that that we then look at in multiple planes, put that all together in a three-dimensional image. Now I can go to my computer and virtually basically perform the surgery ahead of time, making choices. And it's amazing as you go through that process, there are things that you see that you're like, oh gosh, I didn't realize when I made this change, this would happen in a different plane. And so you can do all that ahead of time before you've ever made any final decisions. So once you've optimized it for that patient, now that can be uploaded into the robot. And then in real time, at the time of surgery, we can then apply that plan, making sure that we're guiding everything exactly the way we want it to based on the preoperative work.
So again, so you basically can sort of do the surgery in advance. You can plan exactly what you want to do, have the robot do it for you. And the idea is that you're going to eliminate mistakes and be able to make sure that our patients are doing better. What I found awesome about these types of things, Ryan, is that the hard work and energy that you're putting into the development of this first of its kind robotic, instrument for shoulder replacement is that you're going to help doctors as well as patients that you will never meet, right? You're extending your ability to help, care for humankind and be able to really advance this. And that's really got to be very satisfying.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the fun part about all this, right? Because at the end of the day, there's a patient in this road. We can talk about all the other stuff that gets involved in the business side and government regulations and yada yada yada. You pick your topic, but at the end of the day, there's a patient at the end of that road that we really care about and that we want to have the best outcome possible. Because, like you said, it may be your mom or my mom, or somebody else's loved one. So that's
Exactly.
really the cool part about all of this.
So again, let's keep going on the stuff that you and I have passion together about. And so rotator cuff surgery in particular, you talked about it. We were mechanics, right? For the first 20 years of my clinical practice, I was a mechanic just fixing stuff with screws and sutures and all kinds of stuff. But now I've become more of a biologist, right? And so the rotator cuff augmentation bell has rung, right? At this point. So what are your thoughts about, you have a lot of experience with rotator cuff augmentation. What are you doing these days in trying to make your rotator cuffs heal better for your patients?
Well, I've talked at length about this, and I think the funny about I think we've only scratched the surface, and there's so many different angles with which we can attack this, right? So we've got the mechanical part, you've got the suture anchors, and how we're going to fix the tendon back to bone, but what do we do with the biology? How do we augment that? And so, I've utilized a lot of different techniques, all in the, trying to search for the holy grail, if you will. So we've got collagen grafts, whether they, come from some kind of a dermis or they come from, bovine or, that kind of a thing, and then the question is, okay, now the whole idea is of a collagen framework, right? To allow the cells and that tissue to grow through and into our tissue to help with the healing. Then there's questions, okay, is it on top of the tissue, or is it need to be under the tissue in between, kind of a scaffold that's actually in between the area where it's actually the healing is occurring. So we did some work with a product that was basically kind of attached to the anchor.
You can use company names. It's okay. This is not a CME thing. It's okay.
It's called BioWick.
Yeah, that's fine. You can use names.
Yeah, so that's actually been published. And it actually had very good results. Enhancing the healing. And then we've got the whole thing from using people's blood and growth hormones and what kind of tissue factors can we utilize and what's the best source of those. And then the challenge I think we have next is we know that a lot of these, there's a lot of good data, whether it be from sheep studies or even human studies, is then we have to be able to prove, okay, what's the impact, what's the cost effectiveness, and what's that return, right? And so I think that's our next challenge is to be able to put all these pieces together to find what's the optimum way to do these procedures to enhance the biology and to do it in the most cost effective way we can.
Yeah, I'm gonna quote one of your buddies, Stefan Pill, who's from the Carolinas as well. And he's like, Scott, why are we calling these things rotator cuff tears? Right? I mean, yeah, I mean, there's some people that fall down and they tear the rotator cuff, but the vast majority of patients, it's a degenerative failure of the rotator cuff where it inserts onto the bone. And it's like, all right, well, it didn't work the first time. Like, why are we just going to put the thing back where it was before and expect to have a different outcome? So you're right. So orthobiologics, or we can augment with collagen patches, the BioBrace from ConMed, the Regeniten from Smith and Nephew, on and on. Just about every company has one at this point, and we could certainly talk about our personal experience. But I think we're going to have to do better showing that what we can do is cost effective, provides for better outcomes for patients as we get going as well. Another common area that you and I have is that we are opioid sparing, surgeons in our clinical practice. And you published one of the really important papers taking a look at Exparel liposomal bupivacaine as a regional block. And you used that in a randomized controlled trial, which you the efficacy of using that. What are you doing these days right now for your total shoulders and rotator cuffs to make sure that your patients safely and effectively go through surgery and don't get addicted to opioids?
Well, I've heard at length about this, and I'm a big believer. I think you have to, live on a rock not to understand the impact that opioids have on our communities and people's lives. And obviously there's times where maybe you mentioned some of these things in the past of where they can be utilized, but as much as we can avoid them, the better. And I think people just do better and they feel better. And so the whole idea of multimodal pain management strategies around the time of surgery, I think is critically important. So, everything from using, some NSAIDs and things like, nerve medicines and those types of things preoperatively and postoperatively, I think are important. But the other thing is, okay, how do we optimize the things that we're doing? So I started looking at the blocks. I initially started using an interscalene pain catheter because it gave a little bit of low dose for a longer period. So that was an improvement over a single shot short acting block. And then as I started looking at Exparel, I'm like, now wait a sec, I think we've got something else here with a slower release. Because the one thing that I always couldn't get a good handle on, it got better with some of the other multimodal things, was that spike of pain invariably at 2-3 o'clock in the morning post surgery. All of a sudden people are like, oh my gosh, my nerve endings woke up and what the heck's going on here? And so the intriguing thing for me with Exparel was that slow release where I'm like, well, gosh, if we could get rid of that quick spike, I think you set patients up, even though the block may stop at 2 or 3 days or whatever, I think we've set the tone for their overall recovery. And so that's kind of why I set out to do the study, to prove, hey, that's my theory. Is that really what happens? And so I went head to head with what I was already doing, which was an interscaling block. And although they were effective, the Exparel block was dramatically more effective. And really 3 things that came out of that study that helped me even in our own system is, one, the pain management, the pain relief was dramatically better. They used less narcotics. So number one, the patients did better, which is most important. But 2, the other things we look at from economics, cost effectiveness, it actually decreased the time required for the blocks with the anesthesiologist to allow them to do other things. And the patients going through the procedure had less of that involved, but also was way more cost effective. So really from a threefold, evaluation, it was a no-brainer to make the switch. And so that's a big impact on my recovery as well.
Right there with you, brother. I mean, I do that for every rotator cuff now. Many of my rotator cuffs are opioid free. I mean, which had been previously one of the most painful operations that you could do with high rates of opioid addiction. And when it comes to cost savings, another Ortho Show alum, Ron Navarro, published an awesome paper showing that patients weren't going back to the emergency room for urinary incontinence or nausea or vomiting and all these other things. So there was cost savings there too. All right, so let's segue to the next thing that we share, which is that, you're not just done at 3 days when the nerve block wears off, right? Then you got to recover. You got to get your range of motion back. You got swelling and bruising and things need to heal. And you started to become excited about photobiomodulation therapy, which is also known as laser therapy. And you have opened an ortho laser center in Louisville, Kentucky. And so tell us about your experience there.
Yeah, so once again, There's lots of things, that come across, our desks that you try to vet out that's kind of my personality is, I'm not the first one just to grab something, so I spent a lot of time, and I said we laugh vetting it out, because I think, gosh, this seems to have some teeth to it. And so as I started looking into it, I realized that this technology had been used in the vet industry for years, which is amazing because a lot of things we have in orthopedics come from the vet industry.
How about you're a Louisville, Kentucky dude. Every single equestrian veterinarian is using laser treatment.
Absolutely. And as I started asking around, they're like, "Oh, this is a great technology. You should definitely get involved with that." And so that obviously that kind of prompted me to then talk to you and look into the whole opportunity to bring it to our patients. And I'd say we'll be a year open in August, and it's been a great addition to my practice. Yeah, I have patients, let's say, that have had one shoulder done pre-ortho laser and one post, and they swear by the fact that it makes a big impact on their overall recovery. So it's been a great addition to the overall armamentarium and treatment algorithm for me. And it's not just, post-surgical is really what drove me to get it initially. But then once you have the technology, you start looking at, gosh, like my son had a hamstring injury. So I'm over there, at night, lasering the heck out of his hamstring. We were there last night. Actually, I had my daughter and my
I love it. My wife's like, why won't you bring one of those lasers home? Why do I got to go to the center? But though it's so true. It's for acute injuries, it works great. And then all the chronic inflammatory conditions too, which we don't have great solutions for, arthritis in all various areas, tendonitis, tendinopathy as well. So yeah, I mean, we're so excited to have you there. And what a, again, I think Louisville was severely affected by the opioid crisis. So giving back to your communities by providing an non-opioid alternative for the management of pain and keeping people moving is really wonderful. And we had some great news today. Rod Meyer is our new CEO. We're excited to be able to share that, who is one of the original orthopedic distributors and, absolute gurus from Warsaw, Indiana. Big fan of his, and we're so thrilled that he's going to be a part of what we're doing as well.
Yeah, it's a great addition. I mean, you can't talk to the kind of orthopedic insiders very long with it, and you bring up his name, and they're pretty aware of what he brings to the table. So it's a great get, and it'll really help us push kind of the message forward.
Yeah, we want to scale this thing, right? I mean, at the end of the day, there's tremendous basic science and clinical data that shows that laser or photobiomodulation therapy works, and we want to make it available for patients all across the country so that this is an option instead of perhaps injections or medications or delaying surgery. If you do have surgery, making surgery even go better for you as well. Look, Ryan, I mean, what a pleasure it has been to have you on the show. We have so much common ground in the things that you and I do in our clinical practice. It's always incredibly refreshing to find another, private practice orthopedic surgeon that wants to change the world and make a difference with the time you're here, and your passion for teaching and education and research with industry and development of new ideas and concepts. Kudos to you, brother. You're doing awesome work there in Louisville.
Appreciate it, Scott. As always, it's always a pleasure.
You are now an Ortho Show alumni, brother. We'd love to have you. This is Dr. Scott Sigman, #FollowTheFro, host of the Ortho Show. Till next time.